hello everyone, and welcome to Listening to Lancaster. It is my pleasure today to have with me the Complete Count Committee for the Census in Lancaster County. I have Milzy Carrasco from the City of Lancaster, Emma Hamme from, yep, there's the sign, Emma Hamme from the County Planning Department, and then Heather Valudes from the Lancaster Chamber. So thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm excited to talk about this important topic, and I think it might be best to start with an overview of what is the census and why it's important and what's at stake for Lancaster County. Emma, do you want to lead us off?
Sure, absolutely. So the census is basically a count of everyone living in the United States. It happens only once every 10 years, and it's super important because state and federal governments basically have hundreds of billions of dollars of funding to distribute. All their revenue from taxes needs to be given back out for different programs and services. So the only way to distribute that money fairly is to have a complete count and having good data. So that's one of the primary purposes for the census. So anything from schools, Title I education funding, roads, bridges, transportation, public transit, community services, just about anything you can think of that's provided by the government. In some way, the funding they receive is linked to the census data. So it's really important we get a complete count. It's also how we apportion seats in the House of Representatives and how state legislative boundaries are drawn. So not only is there money, but there's also sort of, the political side of things and making sure that your voice is counted. And the other thing about the census I just want to say is that it's totally private and confidential. So the data that the government's collecting is only used for statistical purposes. They can't share data, like they can't give data to ICE or, they can't report data to your local housing agency or anything like that. It is strictly for statistical purposes. So that's why we all decided to sort of come together as a community to really advocate and make sure that everyone knows how important the census is.
Excellent.
Well said, Emma.
Do you guys want to add anything, like how important it is for the business community or the city?
I think I would stress, especially during this time and during this time of COVID and just so many things that are going on. Our community is specifically, so I'm the chair for the Heart to Count for the city of Lancaster. And our schools here are suffering and they really need help. So it's more than ever the importance of our community completing their census and providing our most vulnerable, which is our youth, our children in the city, this opportunity to receive this funding to improve, their education and their future. And if we start looking at it on what, as an individual, is important to us here in the city, all of that just ties into census. Like Jonathan, before we started this call, you mentioned housing, you mentioned street, Emma, you mentioned street infrastructure. So there's something that is incredibly important to us as residents of the city of Lancaster and the county, and how the census really contributes and can impact, some of that work. So I'm super passionate about our youth and about the opportunity to make sure that we get everyone counted so that our kids get the funding that they deserve.
Yeah, and I think those are all great points from the community perspective. I think also from the business perspective, a piece of the way we look at it is that this data is really, it's the only source we have that's verifiable and tells us about trends in our population, which from a business perspective is really about helping businesses to make better decisions regarding their expansions or closures of facilities or hiring strategies or all these different things. You look at how businesses are deciding where they're locating headquarters today, and it's really driven around the population that's there and education information about that population and a variety of other things. But it's so critical to know who's in our community, what is the demographics of our community, what does that makeup look like, to really help inform businesses. So as they're thinking about risks or return on investment or what they're doing within a community, that data is just as important for those decisions as it is for federal funding being pushed down and for decisions around our political seats and those types of things. So a lot of different factors really play into the importance of this data and having as robust of a set of data as we can for our community.
Absolutely. This is really important stuff, and also it's mandated in the Constitution, right? So
right. And there's that, yeah.
And there's that.
Forgot that, yeah.
So I've seen folks go around and be part of trying to get a count from folks at doors. How is that working? I've also got a package in the mail telling me how to complete my census. I did that online. So how can folks complete the census, and what's the deadline here?
Yeah, so the deadline, first of all, is really important. It is September 30th. Please respond to your census by September 30th. And that deadline, actually, because of COVID, was moved. And it's actually been moved twice now. So that can be a little bit confusing, but the most important thing is to just get your census in as soon as you
Do
can.
it.
Yeah, so the Census Bureau should have sent you reminders in the mail. In some rural parts of the county, they actually had census employees dropping census forms directly at houses. But this is the first census where you can actually respond online or by phone. In the past, you could only do it by mail. So we are very fortunate that we have those options, especially for COVID. You don't have to put yourself at risk. You can just call a phone number or go to the Census Bureau website, 2020census.gov. If you don't respond, the Census Bureau has an operation called the non-response follow-up. So they are still sending enumerators to the door. So they will knock on your door several times in an effort to try and get this information from you. They're following all the CDC guidelines, so they're trying to be as safe about it as they possibly can be. But if they can't get a hold of you, then part of their standard protocol is actually to go to your neighbor or go to your landlord and knock on the door and just try and get information. We've had some emails like, hey, is this supposed to be happening? But yes, they have to try and get as good a sense of who's living in that unit as possible to make sure we have a complete data. So yeah, and the other thing that's sort of strange is that even though it's September now, you're supposed to count yourself as you were the place where you were sleeping and living most of the time on April 1st. So that was sort of mid-pandemic. So that sort of adds to some of the confusion around this census.
You know, it affects students, college students that are actually home now, you know, and so, yeah, those census number really impact those smaller towns that are college towns and universities.
For sure.
So if someone, that's a good point. So if someone's a college student living on campus, but is from Lancaster County, how do they fill out the census?
So you should respond. This was a really big issue, and we have an education subcommittee that we've been working with, and this came up a lot. So a lot of the colleges, if you're living on an on-campus sort of situation, typically they're counted in a different operation called the group quarters operation. So in some cases in March, colleges had already responded about those students. But even if you're living on an off-campus residential unit, for example, and you were supposed to be there April 1st, but for COVID, you should still be counted at that location, which is really confusing for people. Wow. But you should not be counted at your home location. You should be counted at the college location. And the reason for that, if you think about college towns, for most of the year, their populations are increased by, thousands of people in some cases. And so they need to be able to meet the infrastructure needs and the social service needs of all the people living there. If the students are not counted there, that's a huge differential for college towns.
Right. And Milzy, you talked a little bit earlier about a hard to reach population. Can you talk a little bit about who exactly is a hard to reach person and
Sure.
How do you go about reaching them?
Yeah. So I would say the primary are individuals that have language barriers. And so immigrants that have come here to the U.S. that typically are not comfortable with sharing, their information. It's a cultural issue. And so I would say like that's the greatest category of people that are the hardest to count at this moment. We've been working pretty hard on getting information out, bilingual information. We've worked with local agencies on translating a lot of the documents. Heather has really led the charge on printed materials for the city and for the county. So great job, Heather, and working with Church World Services to get the documents translated in various languages. We've worked on posting information at very essential businesses during COVID, so gas stations, grocery stores. We've also here at the city sent out 2 different mailers. We had door hangers that were COVID census related, as well as we did a citywide mailing for the folks that are residents here. Jonathan, I'm not sure if you received one of those if you're a city resident, but that was kind of where that originated from. And one of the things that we're actually working on right now is September 22nd, the mayor's proclamation, and we're going to be actually, here it is right here on my desk. We're going to be teaming up with other mayors. She's going to challenge other mayors on a proclamation day on September 22nd. That's the census emergency. It's actually we're in a state of an emergency for the census. And we can't express that enough. We're going to ask all these other mayors to come alongside. Here in the city, we are going to have a caravan. This idea actually originated from one of our sister cities, Reading, that has been doing an incredible job with community engagement and the census there. They shared with us this template, so we're really excited to implement that here. And so the mayor and some city officials will be traveling around some of our lower census tracts. We're going to have some MQAs, which are mobile questionnaire units, and we're going to team those MQAs up with some neighborhood leaders. So we're actually working on the mapping of that now, and the stations are where we're going to have some stops. And we're going to work on some marketing efforts with our sister city Reading and have a town hall talk with both of the mayors, because the greatest challenge is cultural and that language barrier, that our residents are facing. And the city of Lancaster is 47% Hispanic. And we also know those numbers have increased with the Hurricane Maria, what's happened in Puerto Rico. A lot of families have come and relocated here in Lancaster City. So it'll be really interesting to see when the census is completed, how those numbers have adjusted. Have we has the Hispanic community grown, over the 50%, or what other demographics have grown? So those are some of the efforts that we're doing. I think the greatest call to action, everyone that's watching this video, is to talk about it every time that you're speaking to someone, to post about it, to share it, to challenge someone. Did you complete your census? Feel comfortable about that, because it's just impacting where you live, the people that you serve, your neighbors, just everything around you. So I cannot express enough. I don't know. It's just everyone just talk about it, post about it, share about it. And that's the only thing that we're asking for right now from your viewers.
You got it. And Heather, what's the outreach efforts been like within the business community in Lancaster?
Yeah, so we went into this with a pretty robust plan for how we were going to do business outreach. We have, and it's still available, there's an entire toolkit online specifically for businesses with messages for how they can reach their employees, how they can utilize social media, how they can touch base with their customers to encourage census participation. And we really came at that from this place of recognizing that I think it's something like 75% of people trust their employer more than any other institution to make good decisions for the community. And so we really wanted to encourage business to play a role in ensuring that people were completing their census forms. COVID certainly did throw that for a loop. A lot of these strategies were really workplace-based. So, things in a lunchroom and putting things in with paychecks or general mail that you send out to employees. And at the kind of height of census time, most people were under emergency orders to stay home. So it really threw a wrench into some of the planning there. But we do continue to promote that. The other thing, though, that we were really able to secure through this process, and thank you to Comcast for their support, they granted Lancaster County with a grant that allowed us to do significant outreach into the community. So we had billboards up all around Lancaster County, specifically targeted to communities that traditionally have been harder to count. And then we also did a substantial outreach effort with hard to count communities. So as Milzy said, really focused on language barriers and that component of things. So through that grant, we were able to support printed materials. We were able to support videos, translation of different videos, that type of thing. But we were also then able to go out into some of the publications that are focused to the Amish population and ensure that the message was getting to them as well. So trying to really make sure it was spread out throughout the county and capturing as many people as we could. Through that effort, we also did a huge outreach, a large print run where we put flyers into every box that was going for an emergency food supply for people. So anybody that was picking up food supply throughout this time, there was 1 week where every box that got picked up had one of the census flyers in it. So really doing outreach. It was kind of a shift, I think, in direction of what we might have anticipated. We expected a lot more of this to happen in kind of in-person interactions that were happening across organizations and agencies and employers, but we were still able to deploy it just in a different way. And I'm proud of the work that so many in the community did to really make that happen, to still try and get to these target populations. We also did significant social media outreach, which this really came up, so much of this did come under that grant. It was just led out through Comcast efforts through the chamber. So many of our partners were helpful there. We do, like I said, we do still have the toolkit available for businesses. We do continue to push it out to them. It's really focused on key tips and messages, social media messages, anything that they can use. It's got all kinds of different examples in it that employers can use, even for emails and that kind of thing. They would have to update the date, but that's about it.
Great. And do you find that the employers, the companies are participating in sending stuff out?
Yeah, when we first started this, I think we heard from more that were like, oh yeah, we'll send something to our employees. And we did some targeted outreach there as well to larger employers, specifically sending it to them, asking them to think about how they promote it with their workforce. Admittedly, it was about 2 weeks into that effort that COVID became a crisis. And so it's been hard to kind of capture that same attention with this message, with all that's happening for business and for their employees. But we do, like I said, we're still promoting it and trying to encourage it that way as well.
Right. Fantastic. And obviously the very important work that you've all done has paid off. I think I saw recently we were number 1 or number 2 in terms of responses in the Pennsylvania for a county. Is that right?
Yes, we are number 2 after Bucks County. We're also tied with Chester County now, though, so we've really got to just stay ahead of Chester County. That's super important.
That's really important.
We're at about a 76.8% response rate, which is great, but that still means that there are tens of thousands of households in our county that have not been counted yet. So we're doing good, but we still got more work to do.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what message would go out to folks to help get us that last quarter of the population a response within the month?
So, I would just echo some of the things that Milzy said. Think about the people you interact with every day. Think about your constituency or your employees or, whoever you have contact with. That's the really interesting thing about the census. Like the 3 of us are sitting here, but each of us has probably reached out to dozens or hundreds of people, sent emails and social media. Like we have so many partners trying to reach out. But there are always more people to reach, right? So any reach that you have, if you have an email group, if you have a book club, if you have a newsletter, anything that you have, you can put out a really quick census message about that. We have materials we can provide to folks if they're interested in putting a message out. The Census Bureau website has tons of, pre-made posters, flyers, really anything you could ever want and more, we can help with. So we're just asking for folks to keep talking about it and put the word out, and we're happy to help however we can.
Excellent. And in the link, in this video in the description will be links to many different resources, including the census website, so that if you have not done so, you can do so through the link in this video. And as a result of this conversation, I'm going to change my signature line in my emails to have something about census. I didn't think about that, but hey, go for it.
Awesome.
So, wonderful.
Jonathan, I just want to say we have, we're 26 days away, from completing our census. And again, can't stress enough, the state of emergency that we are in related to census and this work. And so really, thank you so much for this opportunity to share and to share with the community the work that we've been doing. But as Emma said, there's still a lot of work that needs to get done, and we can't do it alone. So please share this information, get activated, and we need your help.
For sure.
Excellent. Well, big thanks to all three of you for being here today and sharing time to talk about this, and for all the work you're doing to get the census done. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks.